Oh yeah, that's the way to start the show tonight with our wonderful, wonderful guest, Jeff Chang. Can't Stop, Won't Stop. That is our theme song, originally done by Super Jack, remixed by Dr. Uhuru Williams, Black Power scholar, author, professor, and side hustle, The Wheels of Steel, the abs of steel on the wheels of steel. Welcome to the show, everybody. Good evening to our friends on the East Coast. Good afternoon to our friends in the West, and good in-between time to our friends in those in-between spaces. Welcome, 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 my friends. Welcome to the Social Justice Power Hour. Welcome to the virtual headquarters, the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice. I, of course, am Robert Seda Schreiber, your chief activist here at the center and your host for this evening, as I have been for the past year and, 8 months now since the pandemic started. Can't stop, won't stop. How's that? Over 400 shows, 400 some odd shows, many of them very odd indeed. And we're so looking forward to chopping it up tonight with Jeff Chang. But we know that Jeff has brought so many friends, followers, fam, all sorts of folks to our yard tonight. So welcome if it's your first time at the Power Hour. And to entice you back, as I said at the outset, we do this 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific every single freaking weeknight. So we hope that you'll come back and join us again. And to entice you, here are some highlights, just some highlights, my friends, of things that are coming up on the Power Hour. Throwback Thursdays, as I said, we've been doing this 400 times plus. So we want to bring back some of the meaningful moments from our shows. So this month, Throwback Thursdays will include poets from Puerto Rico, Denise Froman, Dr. Eric Cervini, queer historian, April Rain, Oscars So White, Amanda Jette Knox, Maven of Mayhem, and a wonderful author and transgender family supporter, and of course, one of my favorite shows, if I may dare say, David Camp, author of Sunny Days, bringing to us Bernadette Yao from Zoom, and Emilio Delgado Luis on Sesame Street. This show was just the end-all, be-all. So that's our Throwback Thursdays this month. And then our new shows, We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation with Eric Garcia, Kalisa Ray coming back to us, Ghost in a Black Girl's Throat, raising up Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer voices. Jim Henson's birthday is coming up. Brian J. Jones is going to be here to talk about the great man. Adam Gopnik, one of the greatest thinkers of our generation, my friends, 1,000 Small Sanities, OG radical of the real. Queer yoga every Tuesday night. Make sure you come join us. Take a breath, both literally and figuratively, as our queer yoga master Jasmani leads us to virtual nirvana. Jonathan I will be back. He is going to talk about Ali, a Life. He's a tremendous book. And the documentary is coming up on PBS with Ken Burns. Can't wait for that. And Dr. Peniel Joseph, our beloved BRCSJ board member, Black Power scholar, his incredible, pivotal, impactful, meaningful book, Sword and the Shield, is coming out in paperback, and he'll be with us on the eve of that release to share his thoughts. And finally, my friends, please do join us this Friday night for a very safe, masked, and vaxxed live in-person benefit concert for our own Byron Center for Social Justice. We are looking for a new home. We lost our headquarters during the pandemic. We're looking to raise the money to build back better, as it were. David Brinsey, local folk legend, will be here. And as I mentioned before, Super Jack, the musician who created our theme song, and by the way, full disclosure, my son, who I'm so proud of, will be in attendance, and please do join us for this great concert. Link to get tickets is in the comments section. So all that, just some highlights, my friends. Make sure you come on back. But tonight, oh my gosh, Jeff Chang has written extensively about culture, politics, the arts, and music. His first book, Can't Stop, Won't Stop, A History of the Hip-Hop Generation, garnered many awards, including the American Book Award, the Asian American Literary Award, and was just updated with co-author Davy D. Cook in a new edition for young adults, along with a new audio book. Jeff has been a USA Ford Fellow in Literature, one of the Utne Reader's 50 visionaries who are changing your world, and the Frederick Douglass 200, honoring living individuals who best embody the work and spirit of Frederick Douglass. He has written for a number of publications, honestly, just too many to name, as well as numerous books, too numerous to shout out, but including these pivotal titles: Who We Be, A Cultural History of Race in Post-Civil Rights America, and We Gonna Be All Right, Notes on Race and Resegregation. Jeff co-founded Culture Strike, now known as the Center for Cultural Power and Color Lines, serves as Race Forward's Vice President of Narrative Arts and Culture, and also co-founded Soul Sides, now Quantum Projects, one of the most influential and severely slept on hip-hop indie labels. And I could talk all night about Blackalicious alone, my friends. I could also spend this whole hour talking Jeff's accolades and bona fides, but let's chop it up with the man himself. So please join me in welcoming Jeff Chang to our Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice Power Hour. Jeff, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Oh, what an honor it is to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's really, it's a pleasure. Here's the book, just so I can shout it out at the outset. Can't Stop, Won't Stop. You know, and folks who have watched the show before know this is a phrase I use often. So it's, if nothing else, to have you embody it right here to bring it to us, we're thrilled about that. So again, my friend, thanks for being with us. So let's talk first and foremost. This has been buzzing around my head all day. We have a connection, the Berkeley to Brooklyn pipeline, crossing not only the United States, but really the world. I taught at UCal Berkeley for a spell, and I was born in Brooklyn. So I know that you have a connection to both those pivotal places, both in hip hop and in our culture. So let's start there. Let's talk about, why are those two spaces so important to the culture?
Wow. Berkeley to Brooklyn. That's a wonderful way to start. I'm actually sitting here right now in Berkeley. I too, I came in as a student at Cal, as did Davy D, my writing partner on Can't Stop, Won't Stop, on this youth edition. We came in during the anti-apartheid movement. And that was a period that, the period that we came in, we had a lot of professors. We were taught by a lot of people who had been frontline leaders, thinkers in, the third world liberation movement, and the Black Power movements, the Asian American movements, Chicano American Indian movements. Those were the folks who taught us. And um, for us, I think that kind of spirit pervades through in terms of the way that we look at the world. That kind of notion of racial justice and social justice. We were really deeply shaped by the anti-apartheid movement, um, and then subsequent to that, what became a student movement against racism, and that in many ways sort of set the foundations in place for a lot of the work that folks are continuing to do now on the campuses. So, Berkeley is deep in my heart. It's one of the two places I call home. But Brooklyn, man, I went to go work at the turn of the millennium in what was then sort of the beginnings of the internet spaces for folks of color. It was sort of there was a number of different companies who were setting up shop, trying to speak to young folks, the hip hop generation, um, and so I went to go work for an organization called 360 Hip Hop, and moved to Brooklyn and got my sort of initiation there into Brooklyn at that time. I lived there for a couple of years, 2.5 years, and would have stayed, but that we needed to get back to the family here on the West Coast. And you know, at that particular point, "Can't Stop, Won't Stop" was sort of a germinative idea, and it came out of my Soul Sides experience working with this legendary label with Black Alicious and DJ Shadow, Lyrics Born, Latyrix, and a whole bunch of other amazing folks. And the sort of idea there that culture could be revolutionary, and being able to be in Brooklyn in the space where so many of the pioneers had come up to just be around New York City, to be able to be in the Bronx all the time with the pioneers and to follow in their footsteps and hear their stories. It just, it really gave me a deep understanding of where the culture comes from. And that was what I set out to do. So Brooklyn was where I started writing "Can't Stop, Won't Stop," and you can feel the energy of the Bronx and Brooklyn all through that book, just because that was what I was in the middle of all the time. Just burning that midnight oil, just working around the clock and loving being out in the streets with folks.
And what I love is it's a really impactful connection between the Asian American community and the African American community, and those connections are so important. So we understand, and it ties into what some of you are doing right now. And I don't want to cross streams and go back and forth in narrative and time, but solidarity is such an important movement right now, and it speaks to the very origins of Can't Stop, Won't Stop. But it brings us to our present day when our Asian American community is facing so much violence in the face of prejudice and misunderstanding about COVID and all the rest of it. So it's wonderful how you've been able to tie that all in. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then I want to get right back to Can't Stop, Won't Stop and hip hop. But I think that's really important to kind of talk about at the outset as well.
Yeah, sure. You know the I'll take it all the way back. For me, "Can't Stop, Won't Stop" and my engagement in hip hop, not just sort of as a cultural movement, but as a political movement in many ways, as a place where a lot of people were able to forge their worldview, and their engagement, with politics, not just cultural politics, but organizing, community organizing. Um, it kind of comes out of that period. I came up again during that period, late 80s, early 90s. We were profoundly shaped by the uprising in Los Angeles in 1992. And for those of us who were Asian American and Pacific Islander in background, it was a reckoning for us because in so many ways, there was a huge gap between what we had kind of been taught, this sort of third world liberation ideal, everybody sort of joining arms and marching together, um, black, Asian, Chicano, Indian, American Indian, white, poor white folks, progressive white folks joining together, and sort of marching forward. And we had to really actually, coming out of the uprising, examine our own privilege and what our role was in that. Like it was a reckoning for us because we had to really get down to the roots of the history of racism in this country, the history of exclusion, and how we've been differently sort of shaped by that, right? But also to really forefront and acknowledge our own anti-blackness, our own anti-indigeneity. And I say that as somebody who comes from a Chinese and a Native Hawaiian, background, but who did not necessarily culturally grow up, um, indigenous. So, all of these things were flowing through the air for us, and as a result, a lot of us of Asian and Pacific Islander background, we kind of fled, actually, to be completely honest, Asian and Pacific Islander politics, and really kind of spent our time deeply immersed in learning the lessons of the Black freedom struggle, especially. And that led me, I think, into a place where I was much more committed to hip hop. The politics that were emerging from hip hop at that particular period were young people standing up against police brutality, standing up against state violence, standing up against the violence that's done in the schools, um, and standing up against the violence being done against the earth, against the environment. And that profoundly shaped our way of thinking. And so, what we saw, I think, around the time of me moving to Brooklyn, actually, were these new uprisings of young people who were coming together with a different sense of what it meant to be moving in the world, and maybe taking off some of the blinders of our rose tinted glasses around third world liberation, and thinking really about how is it that we are able to join together, recognizing intersectionality in of oppressions, and being able to articulate a new ethic for how to move forward. And so that informed Can't Stop, Won't Stop. That the conclusion of the original version. I don't think I'm giving anything away here, but
No
it's
spoilers.
literally, yeah, it's literally like, set in 2000, where what we called then the hip hop activist movement was really kind of beginning to step onto the national stage, and eventually resulted in propelling, all of these new faces into political power, including people like President Barack Obama, for better and for worse. We could talk about that, but that was sort of the vibe, right? And so for us, in this particular moment, us sort of, you know, new elders, I guess, right? Us sort of new OGs, right? Coming around and seeing what's been happening over the last year, knowing what was going to be coming when we started hearing all of this stuff coming out of President Trump's mouth, early last year. Um, it's about trying to reinforce uh, a sense of moving together, right? And not doing harm to the very folks who lead us, right? Those who are living at the edge of all of these intersectional oppressions, and feeling it and proposing solutions that lift all of us up. And so we didn't want to have a movement that was going to be, stop Asian hate, that was then going to propose a lot of quote unquote solutions that would be causing more harm to Black communities, to Indigenous communities, to Brown communities, to our own communities, really, right? To poor people. Um, that was going to be more carceral, that was going to like increase state violence. And so it's really important for us to be able to kind of come together and talk about what solidarity really means, right? It's not just the like, hey, you protect me, I'll protect you type of thing. It's about understanding that the freedom struggle requires us to be able to move in different ways, but to be able to move together.
And I think that it's wonderfully, you mentioned intersectionality a few moments ago, and it goes hand in hand with solidarity. And I like to think that our namesake Bayard Rustin, who was the godfather of intersectionality before Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term some 20 years later. He left us right before hip hop really blew up. And I like to think that he would have really dug it and he would have really been into it because he was very musical his own self. He was a great singer and loved expressing himself and his ideas through music as well. So I like to think of him sitting at a turntable and getting Public Enemy and getting
Yeah.
down to all the rest of it and really feeling the vibe of it. But what I really want to talk about is this idea of hip hop being kind of the bringing together of all the cultures, and folks think about it as being a black thing, but it's really not. And folks think about it as being something that is throwaway, that doesn't really address important social and racial justice issues, but it obviously and absolutely does. But there's a popular misconception that's propagated by the right very gleefully about what hip hop is and isn't. So, can you speak to our community about that, about the import of hip hop, and what it really means and what it really can move forward?
Yeah. Well, I disagree with you slightly. I mean, I think absolutely hip hop is a black thing. And
Okay.
that's the source of its power for marginalized, oppressed people all around the world. I think it can't be separated, right?
If I may,
It's
though, maybe a better way of expressing it would be it's evolved into being more than that.
Well, I'd say what it is it's influenced all of us, right? It's powerfully influenced all of us. And again, the it's a black freedom culture, right?
Right.
And in that sense, it carries with it the seeds of the ideas that motivate the black freedom struggle, the black freedom movement. And I think that's powerful, right? And that's just uh, we should embrace that. There's nothing wrong with embracing that, right? What it means is that embedded within hip hop, this black thing, are the seeds of liberation for everyone. And I think that's the lesson that we take away from it. People like Davy D and I, and that we try to, to teach in our classes and to put into writings and that kind of thing. It's nothing to shy away from. It's something to be able to embrace. That it can be both of the things at once, right? That it's just deeply rooted, and that needs to be held up, and that helps us to get away from a world in which we're going to continue to exploit and extract from black freedom culture and black people, black culture bearers, black artists. Um, but it also allows us to say, the joy of influence, right? Like, this has influenced me to be able to kind of see the world in a different way. I like to say, like, for me, I grew up on a little island in the middle of the Pacific, right? To me, New York City, Brooklyn was the Far East. You know what I'm saying? And hip hop, from the very beginning, and reggae and soul music, R&B, all of that stuff that I grew up with, um, African music as well, like all of these things within it, like basically took me towards the Black Freedom Movement, right? They took me towards these types of lessons because they're embedded in there, and so I think that's something that's really, really worth embracing. And I think now, what happens is when you've got a view, right, of culture that doesn't look snobbishly from the top down, like, oh, the people down here, down there, we're up here, right? But instead looks from sort of, where the folks are at up, right? Like, different perspective. And I think it's that point of view that we can relate to, right? It's what, some folks have, called like the underdog type of thing, but it's much deeper than that. It's about trying to find ways forward, for folks who have been suffering. So much of the music comes from trying to find joy in living together and forming community differently. So, for for us, we talk about hip hop as being on the one hand something that's been commodified, and in that way sort of picked up, lifted out of its context, sent all around the world, right? And that then people can receive as this thing that's kind of out there in a transactional kind of a way. But hip hop also is this network of all these different people in community, right, who are organizing against oppression in their community, whether that shows up as people being uh, not being like taught their histories in their classes, whether they're having their cultural practices suppressed, right, or whether that be economic inequities, right, the way that folks are forced into extractive exploitative labor for the benefit and profit of other people. Like people are able to young people are able to instinctively express how they're feeling, what's happening to the environment around them, right? The loss of homes, of land, of culture ways, of food ways, all of those different types of things is what we hear coming out of hip hop communities all around the world. Whether that be again, and I've been lucky to go around the world and experience this personally, but whether that be in the ghettos of Scandinavia, right? Or whether that be in South Korea, right? Or whether that be in Hong Kong, where there's a freedom movement going on, right? Or Indonesia or Africa, South Africa, Kenya, Senegal, wherever, these communities are literally trying to communicate using the tools of hip hop, which is this expression of blackness that comes out of a particular period from the 1970s in New York City, and then spreads to black neighborhoods across the country, and then to everyone around the world.
Yeah, and we all have our pivotal moment of hip hop. We all have that breakthrough. For me, I remember going to CMJ, the College Music Journal
Yes.
convention back in the day, and you would come home with garbage bags full of cassettes, right? Cassettes, right?
Yeah.
And I remember
Yeah.
one of the cassettes had Night of the Living Bassheads,
Oh wow. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
turned it on, and immediately I was like, "What the holy heck is this?"
Yeah.
And it forever changed how I listen to things, how I experience things, and it was such an incredible opening for me in so many ways.
Hmm.
So I want to ask you, if you don't mind, personally, was there a moment for you like that? Was there a
Oh
song
man.
or something
Yeah.
you heard or something that happened or something you witnessed that was like, this is more than I thought it was. This is bigger than I dreamed it was.
Over and over again. I mean, as kids, we heard Rapper's Delight, and we just wanted to learn every word of it. And this is again on a little island in the middle of Pacific, and then for me, sort of like seeing movies like Wild Style and Style Wars, and realizing that these kids who had just been abandoned, right? Like the world said, we're not looking for you anymore. We're putting you in this little place over here, and we're just going to ignore you, right? Until you just go away, right? And the kids said, nah, we're going to make noise. We're going to make music. We're going to dance, right? We're going to find the joy in life. We're going to give you our art on these trains that move through the entire city, right? That stuff really really impacted me, because I came up during a period in the history of the islands and the history of Hawaii where it was about these land struggles, people trying to fight to preserve their land. And the music that came out of the period, this is the music of like my like younger uncles and my older cousins, um, really kind of expressed that. It was pastoral, it was like folk rock and jazz rock, and but it was a way of being able to express, the anger and the resistance against capitalism, global capitalism, transforming the islands into this hub for just tourism, for extraction, um, and uh, and so, for me, for my generation, what we saw was a lot of buildings coming up, right? There's a song, uh, there's a lyric that goes, you know, the beaches they sell that to build their hotels, my fathers and I once knew. I came up in the generation that like the hotels were there. You know what I mean? Um, and so I was mad. I was mad at concrete. You know what I mean? And when I saw these kids just spray painting these beautiful things on their trains, I was like, oh, I can do that. And it was pre-political, right, if you want to put it in those kinds of terms, but I was just like, that gave me a way to kind of express my sentiments at that particular time, you know, to be able to say, hey, we're not going to be anonymous anymore. You can't just go ahead and do this like without some kind of reaction to it. And so I got into graffiti, and that was my sort of um induction, I guess, if you will, into thinking about hip hop as something that was more than just like what we listened to and grooved to on the radio and wanted to learn all the lyrics to.
You mentioned that you said that it was pre-political, and I would take issue with that.
Oh, okay.
Back at you,
Okay.
because I feel like you've been using this word throughout, joy. And I
Mm,
think joy is a political thing. I think
yeah.
expressing joy in a marginalized community, in a ghettoized community, is something that's very political. Don't you think that
Hmm.
even if you're just tagging, even if your graffiti is simply putting your name out there, or putting the name of your community or your folks out there, that in and of itself is a political act, even though it wasn't explicitly so.
Yeah, you're right. It was, you know, and it was a type of thing where it made you try to find the other kids who are getting joy off of this. It got completely gleeful at what people have been able to pull off, right? And the kind of thrill, that kind of ecstasy that you get out of it. Because yes, absolutely. I mean, that's what community is all about, right? Like music is the most social of all the arts. It's the kind of thing where you can do it alone, certainly, and you can get a lot of joy out of it alone. But when you share it with a lot of people, right? That's you know that's justice, right? That's what that Dr. Cornell West talks about, right? It's love in public, right? Um, and so it makes sense that hip hop would uh, attract so many people in that kind of a way, right? Through music, right? But I think about all these other art forms, the dance, right? The cipher, the notion of being in a circle, right? And everybody contributing to that circle. And yeah, like you got to come with it, right? There's a little bit of competition in it. There's a lot of competition in this, but it's advancing the whole group at the same time, right? And people affirm you if you're doing something dope in that circle. I mean, I just think that metaphor is so powerful, right? Um, and it reminds us of what it means to be able to create the social, to be able to create another world.
I love
Absolutely.
that you
Yeah.
invoked Brother Cornell West, and
Hmm.
justice is what love looks like in public, right?
Hmm.
And that is in essence what graffiti is, and what we're talking about, And I
Some
remember,
graffiti.
yeah,
Some
well,
graffiti.
yes,
We
of
should
course,
be.
yes,
Yeah, we can be real about that. Yeah,
of course.
absolutely. Yeah.
But I remember in my past life, I was a middle school teacher, art
Mm.
teacher, and one of the
Hmm.
things I loved to teach about and would always invoke was graffiti, and how it wasn't just vandalism. Some of it was,
Mm.
but there was a lot of art involved, and there was a lot of community involved. And I remember one of the graffiti artists said, "It's a beautiful crime," and I love that turn of phrase, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
it's that Lee Quinones thing of if art is a crime, may God forgive me thing. Absolutely. And I just, just to underscore the point, it's not all graffiti, and we should definitely be real about that, right? There's definitely graffiti there that is related and deeply implicated uh, in the cycle of violence that state violence is a part of, right? And is generating in so many types of ways. Um, and so it's important to be able to kind of recognize that. That's the thing about hip hop too, though, is people want it to all be one way, right? Like it's like, well, how can hip hop be like liberatory if you've got all of these folks who are oppressing women, or marginalizing queer folks, right? And I think the thing that is powerful about hip hop is that it's, it's a medium, right? It's not, and as a medium, it's not necessarily pure, right? But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't recognize its power and engage with it. And I think that on balance, hip hop is a lot more uh, liberatory. Not on balance, I'd say overwhelmingly, right? Hip hop is much more liberatory than the structures that we've been handed, in the status quo. And so that's sort of my gentle defense, if you will, of hip hop, because in the early days that we had a lot of those kinds of conversations with our elders, um, who were like, it's regressive, it's reactionary, um, the politics of it aren't going to take us forward at all. And we're like, yeah, because there's large parts of this that are absolutely, wholly woven into racial capitalism. Like, of course, absolutely. But we struggle with those folks. We're not going to sit off and be pure on the mountaintop and judge people on the ground. And I think that's the thing that keeps on coming back around for me for hip hop is within the beauty thing, right? To go back to the point that you had made that we were starting with here, it's what Talib Kweli talks about. The beautiful struggle, right? It's it's something that there's a lot of joy and beauty to be found within.
But so there you invoked Talib Kweli, and right there, right, you definitely want to be able to say the beautiful struggle and how important that phraseology was. But he also is very problematic in the way that he speaks about a few different types of communities. So how do you, both as a hip hop historian, as a hip hop lover,
Hmm.
personally and professionally, balance those things? Do you
Yeah.
have? I know there's no magic equation, but is there some way to find the import and the beauty in what someone is saying, but
Hmm.
also the ugliness, and how do you, and again, coming back to how do you balance the two?
Right. Well, this is where I think it makes sense for really us to go back to thinking about the relationship between, Bayard Rustin and Martin Luther King, right? And thinking about um, sort of how how we organize, how we move towards liberation together, right? Um, and that's to say that th- there is harm being done, right, in the world, and there's being harm done by people that we care about. Um, and I think the status quo would have us think in a kind of way of what suits me the best. How am I going to be taken care of the best? And it's a type of logic that, if you take it to its natural conclusion, just isolates us and atomizes us. But I think that, what I've learned, and I've learned pretty much everything I need to know from hip hop, right, is that it's about the engagement, it's about the struggling, it's about the deciding, here are the folks who I'm with, right, and if they're not there, well, I have to struggle with them to get there, right? But it's not, and that's part of what this thing is about, like, about hip hop, right? At the core of it is like this call and this response, and sometimes it goes off the rails, and you get a situation where the sort of tensions explode and people end up dead, right? Tupac, Biggie, right? Here are two folks who are they're so much like each other, and they're getting so much out of their relationship with each other, right? And yet there's all these forces that would pull them into violence. And hip hop is the type of thing that came out of a refusal of violence. It came out of gang peace treaties, right? It came out of people saying, no, like rather than us being out here trying to kill each other, we should actually be engaging each other, right? And so we'll engage each other in the cipher, right? And I think that that's in part what it is that we have to do. And now that doesn't mean that we're going to fall into this sort of cultural relativism, right, where everything is all good. No, like we have to be able to define an ethics that's people centered, right? That's about making a place for everyone, right, and that takes care of those who've been the most harmed, the most hurt first. Um, so we've got to have these principles of engagement with each other, but it's about the engagement. It comes out of the engagement, and again, that's partly why I think the metaphor of the cipher is so amazing, right? It's you start with the folks who are there with you, right? And people get their turn in the circle. People have a chance to be able to show what they can contribute, and you form a relationship. But hopefully, that cipher gets bigger, right? And that cipher gets bigger and bigger, right? It doesn't just remain there for you all, and that's something that I think we learned in the transition from like the 90s, the 80s, and the 90s through to now, right? And I think what what we see young organizers doing, young cultural workers, young artists, young culture bearers doing, is trying to think about that, trying to dream and imagine what it means for us to bring all these ciphers together, and that's powerful. It's just really amazing.
And I think that it also, harkening back to that idea of joy, and people think of hip hop often as angry, as violent, figuratively and sometimes literally when you're talking about Biggie and Tupac and the violence in the community. But it harkens also back to the blues,
Mm,
and that was a release,
mm,
and there's a certain joy inherent in that as well. So
mm,
it's this through line throughout the history of music and African American music and Black culture in general, right?
hmm. Absolutely. And it's about what the role of the artist is, right, and the culture bearer in society. And so one of the things that we've done is those of us who kind of work in what the nonprofit industrial complex calls the arts and culture sector came together last year because we've been so Mm. It's been tough. It's the pandemic has been very, very difficult for artists and culture bearers, particularly folks from communities of color. And so we came together last year and we were saying, okay, well, look, we're facing all of these huge issues. We're facing this pandemic. We're facing the economic, sort of fallout from that, the crisis that's coming from that. We're facing this crisis of brutality, right, against Black folks um, that's been ongoing for hundreds of years. But now that has reached a level of visibility where 25 million people can get out into the streets to say no more, right? And we're facing this environmental collapse, right? Right now, I'm in California. We got smoke, you know, mm, in the skies all around us. We're surrounded by it, and people in the mountains are facing disaster. And we've got to be able to come together and figure all of this type of stuff out. And as people have been saying, the pandemic's become a portal. But coming out of that, what is it that we need for artists and culture bearers for us to be able to continue? And in the past, we've gone to government and we said we need jobs and we need funding, right? And that was true. Back then, 2/3 of artists were out of work, and virtually every organization had budget cuts to deal with, and everybody knows that that affected arts organizations and cultural centers in communities of color much, much more, right? So we're thinking, okay, well, how do we articulate this? And we came back to it's not about going to the government and asking for jobs and for funding. It's about getting everyone to understand what it is that artists and culture bearers do. What is it that we do? What's our role, right? Our role is to be glue in times, the glue, the social glue in times of breakdown, social breakdown, right? We are the bonds of cohesion. We create the bonds of cohesion. We tell the stories. We give voice to. We illustrate. We visualize, right? What we look like together, right? And that gives us catharsis. It also gives us a vision of how we can move together. So artists and culture bearers, they're the healers of the soul. They're first responders to the community's soul. And in that regard, if we look at it that way, it's not just like, oh, these are folks who are out there just entertaining us, right? um, and it just, for artists, it doesn't become this thing of, f you, pay me, right? It's like, no, there's something that's actually happening here when we get together and experience a work of art together, right? Or a song, right? Or a dance or anything. um, a mural, a graffiti mural, or a painting on the wall. um, there's something that's happening that's transforming all of us, right? And so in times like this, we're needed more than ever, right? And I think that that's part of what it is that we need to kind of lift up. We need to, as artists and culture bearers, like we need to hold that and be proud of that. And I think that society needs to be able to recognize that as well, in this moment.
And I love that you talk about first responders, because I really feel that's an important term to kind of bring to the conversation. Because I think that hip hop artists and folks that bring voice to communities are now our first responders, are the ones that are calling out the problems before anyone else is seeing it, because they're the one that are living it, and they're able to vocalize it, to musicalize it, to dance it, to graffiti it, to whatever it may be, bring it to the public forefront, bring it to the consciousness, right? And that's what first response is all about, to say, here is a problem, no one's seeing it, I'm going to bring it to you. Now, what can we do to fix it, to resolve it, to make it better, to come together in community?
Right. To share a vision of the way things could be. Absolutely. Yeah. And in that regard, like, convene us, right? To be able to do that as well. And so, we talk often about the solutions in ourselves. Absolutely. And we need the people who can say, well, if that's the case, then let's get us together, right? And that's the organizers, and it's the artists and culture bearers. And so that's basically, those are the folks who are my heroes and Shiro's, and the folks that I want to lift up.
And this has been something that has been throughout our history. It harkens back to the story circles of
Yes.
our ancestors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about the cipher, and you talk about getting together, around a turntable or around a spray can. Those are all things that go all the way back to the caves,
Mm-hmm.
to the cave paintings and to the story circles where people gather around and share those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been something that is very much a part of our DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's how we're wired, actually. Yeah, and it's ancient, and it's also futuristic, and we're just making the case here. We got this thing we wrote called the Cultural New Deal, right? And it's not about a jobs program. It's about transforming the way that we think about arts and culture, in not just in this country, but in the world and in society in general. So yeah, that's just an invitation for folks to check that out, culturalnewdeal.com, and pass it around your communities.
We'll throw that link up in the comments section, everybody, so make sure you look out for that as well. So I am sure that there are still members of our community. And by the way, you know what? Before I continue, let me just throw this up one more time. This is the book that we're kind of talking around it, but it's all here. Can't Stop, Won't Stop. There are, the newest is the young adult edition, which is this, and the first edition, which was the full on. And we recommend you get both. As always, we say, buy a copy for yourself, buy a copy for a friend, buy a copy for an enemy, you'll become a friend.
Yeah. There
right?
you go.
Buy this for your local school district, because this is a great book for kids to have on their shelves and see what an art form this is, how important this is. And most importantly, as I always say, and I want to just really emphasize, as much as we want you to support Jeff and Dave and support our authors, there are some folks who can't afford to buy books, and their local library is the conduit for them to be exposed to these ideas. So make sure you call your local library, do it on a rotary phone, and say, hey, do you have Can't Stop, Won't Stop on your shelves? And if they say no, say as a patron, I beseech you to get a few copies so folks can be exposed to this. So I want to ask you this, and I knew this would go way too quickly, and we only have about 10 or so minutes left. So in that time, for folks that are still reluctant to listen to hip hop, to explore hip hop, to respect hip hop in the way it needs to be acknowledged, can you give us some touchstones? Can you give us some songs or even in a bigger capacity, some moments that people can refer to, can listen to, can be exposed to, that will help them understand how important it is, how meaningful it is, how impactful it is, but also how we've been talking about it, how enjoyable it is?
Gosh, that's a hard question because, at this point, right, like you and I could just talk again for the next 2-3 hours about all the stuff that has given us joy and has kind of helped move us forward in our lives. The piece that feels so relevant in this moment, continuing is Kendrick Lamar's "All Right," right? His song, which became the title of my last book, but which has also been sort of the anthem of folks in the streets, right? For the last, what is it now, 4 or 5 years, I guess. It's longer than that, 5, 6 years, 4, whatever. Yeah, 5 years, 5, 6 years now. It's one of the things that I think got him the Pulitzer Prize, right? If you're thinking that hip hop is not, if you need a Pulitzer Prize, let me say, to convince you to listen to hip hop, this is one of the things that got him a Pulitzer Prize. And musically, it's sort of this seamless blend of all these different types of threads of Black music, Black popular music that we've heard over the last century, from the blues through jazz, all the way up to hip hop. And lyrically, he's offering sort of blues for a new generation. In the verses, it's literally about the difficulties and the struggles of growing up as a young Black man in a segregated neighborhood, South Los Angeles. And then and then when you get to the chorus, there's this huge leap, right, to a sense of hope, right, to trying to find spirituality, right? He's at the preacher's door, and he's got a gun, and he can go 2 different directions, right? And in the end, he says, basically, if you got me, if I've got you, we're going to be all right. Like it's not I'm going to be all right. It's we're going to be all right. We're going to be all right. And that again is I think just a beautiful, beautiful statement of the kind of hope and promise that the Black freedom struggle, Black freedom movement, and Black freedom culture has gifted to all of us, right? We just have to recognize it as such. And the Pulitzer Prize Committee did. So that might be a reason to do that.
And I think that I implore our community, because I know that there's still a lot of folks who are going to be reluctant. And even getting past the beauty of the beats, because the beauty of the beats is the end all be all for me, and I know for you as well. But there's a lyricism in it that a lot of folks miss because they're not hearing it. They're not letting themselves hear it. I think about the Coop, and I think about that line that always hits me every time I hear it. This is the last kiss that Martin ever gave to Coretta. And every time I hear it, even just saying it now, just hit me. And there's so much of that, and there's so much variation in hip hop that people don't realize. So I implore folks to go listen. openly with their ears, with their heart, with their minds, with their souls, with their understanding that this has been about organizing all along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been about bringing people together. It's been about lifting us up and moving us. And yeah, big shout out to Boots Riley down the street. Neighbor, friend, colleague, inspiration. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good man. We'd love to have him on the show sometime.
Yeah.
So this has been phenomenal. I'd love you to share with our folks what's up next for you. What can we look to? I know that you're involved in a lot of things right as we speak about solidarity is and about making sure that we're connecting our Asian American community, our Black communities, our people of color. So
Mm-hmm.
what are we looking to next? I know you mentioned it. If you want to
Yeah.
mention it again, the website where we can read that that new doctrine, as it were. But please share with us where we can find you and where we can move forward together.
Sure. So that's the Cultural New Deal. That's culturalnewdeal.com. I'd love to point to folks to the videos that we did for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. They're at a website called cusunite.com/unite. We've made 14 videos, illustrations of solidarity, including the incredible story of Bayard and his leadership in thinking about an issue that we're facing right now, right? What is our responsibility to the people in whose countries we've gone to conduct war? How do we make peace, right? And to think about the refugee situation and the work that Mr. Rustin did back, through history to focus people on thinking about what the U.S. owed to the people of Southeast Asia and South Asia. Um, and so, those types of stories of solidarity are the types of stories that we want to be able to advance. We've made 14 videos there. They're all under 2 minutes, maybe some under 3, but they're stories that we want to share, and we want people to be able to share, particularly in this moment when so much is being done to pull us apart. And the last thing I'll say is I'm working right now on um, a book uh, about Bruce Lee, uh, and it's sort of a dual biography of Bruce Lee and Asian America. It's called Water Mirror Echo, Bruce Lee and Asian America. And I'm hoping to try to recover the greatness of Bruce Lee through talking about the very real struggles that he went through in the context of the making of what we now call Asian America. So that's what I'm working on now, and that's what's giving me joy in this moment.
It sounds wonderful. When can we hope for that to drop? Is it
Hopefully in a couple years.
all right?
Give me a little time.
We'll give you as much time as you need, but we want to get you back here on the show before that. Thank you so much for this. It's been an honor and a pleasure. It was everything I hoped it would be. I think that you have really done exactly what we hoped you would do. Hip hop is not something that we have discussed enough here on the Power Hour. It's always been a kind of permeating what we do in the music that we listen to, and in our theme song and so on and so forth. But it's wonderful to really bring it forward in a very positive and impactful way, and no one better than yourself, my friend. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks
be
so
well.
much for the invitation. You too.
All right, best to your family, and we'll see you again soon. All right, so that, my friends, is Jeff Chang, author and hip hop historian, and just incredible voice for so many different platforms and so many different communities. And we thank you for being a part of this virtual communion, because again, we do these shows and we've done over 400 of them, but none of them mean nothing without you being in community with us. So thank you, my friends. Please do come back and join us. We are here 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, every single freaking weeknight. So please do come back and join us. We will be here for you. Please be here with us. So until soon, much love and respect. Please be good to each other. Be good to your families, chosen or otherwise. And most especially, my friends, be good to yourselves. You need it, and we need you here with us.
We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers